Take a moment right now and just listen. Not with intent, not with purpose, but just allow the soundscape of your world to wash over you. What do you hear? Perhaps it's the gentle whir of a computer fan, a faithful companion in our digital age. Maybe it's the distant rhythmic rumble of traffic, the lifeblood of a city that never truly sleeps. You might hear the sigh of the wind outside your window, the creak of a floorboard settling in an old house, or the almost imperceptible hum of electricity flowing unseen through the walls around you. This is your sonic environment. It is unique, it is familiar, and for most of us, it is a source of subconscious comfort. It is the soundtrack to our lives, a symphony of the mundane that we learn to filter out, to ignore, until only profound silence or a sudden, sharp noise can command our attention. Now, I want you to hold on to that feeling of familiar quiet. Picture yourself in the safest, most serene space you know. For many, that is the sanctity of their own bedroom, deep in the heart of the night. The day's anxieties have been put to rest, the blue light of screens has been extinguished, and the world outside has finally muted its chorus. This is a sacred time, a liminal space between the conscious and the unconscious, a time for peace, for healing, for the gentle and welcome descent into sleep. It is a portrait of tranquility, defined not by absolute silence, but by the absence of intrusion. But now let's corrupt that portrait. Imagine that in the depths of that quiet, something new begins to emerge. It's faint at first, so utterly faint that you might dismiss it as the whisper of your own blood pressure in your ears, a fleeting auditory illusion. But it doesn't go away. Solidifies. It becomes a persistent, low-frequency drone, a deep, resonant thrumming that seems to exist just at the very precipice of your hearing, a sound you feel as much as you hear. It's not a high-pitched whine or a jarring clang. It is a deep, invasive, bass-heavy pulse, uncannily similar to the sound of a large diesel engine idling. Not next door, but a few blocks away. An engine that is always on. An engine that never ever turns off. You sit up in bed, your heart beginning to beat a little faster. You strain your ears trying to isolate it, to identify it. The sound is still there. A constant, unwavering presence. You slip out from the warmth of your covers, your feet silent on the floor. You walk to the window, the cool night air touching your skin, and you press your ear against the cold glass, hoping to determine its direction. But nothing changes. In fact, in a baffling twist of acoustics, it might even seem a little louder inside. Here in your sanctuary, your rational mind kicks in, searching for a culprit. The refrigerator? You walk to the kitchen and unplug it, plunging the appliance into silence. But the sound remains. The furnace? The air conditioning? You go to the basement or the utility closet and cut the power at the main circuit breaker, silencing every single piece of technology in your home. You stand in the profound, primitive darkness and you listen. The sound is still there. It has become a physical presence, a palpable pressure in your eardrums, a subtle vibration you can begin to feel resonating in your sternum. In a quiet voice, you wake your partner. Do you hear that? You ask, a tremor of uncertainty in your voice. They sit up, listen intently for a long moment, their face a mask of confusion. Then they shake their head. Hear what? It's completely silent. Are you okay? And in that precise moment, your world fractures. Your quiet room transforms. It is no longer a sanctuary. It has become a cell of solitary confinement. The silence you once craved is now an illusion, filled with a maddening, invisible, and intensely personal intruder that only you can perceive. A profound and terrifying isolation descends. You begin to question your own senses, your own sanity. Is this real? Am I imagining it? Is there something fundamentally wrong with me? This is not the prologue to a psychological thriller or a work of supernatural fiction. This is a documented, lived reality for a small, geographically scattered, and deeply distressed percentage of the global population. They are the hearers, the sufferers, the unwilling audience to a phenomenon so strange, so persistent, and so maddeningly elusive that it has baffled scientists, frustrated governments, and driven ordinary, rational people to the very brink of despair. They are the tormented listeners of an unexplained sound known, with a stark and simple finality, as the hum. For more than half a century, this acoustic mystery has emerged like a phantom in disparate locations all around the globe, from the post-industrial landscape of Bristol, England, to the high desert art colony of Taos, New Mexico. From the sun-drenched beaches of Sydney, Australia, to the industrial heartland of North America. It appears without warning, it selectively torments a minority of the population, and it resists almost every attempt at a rational scientific explanation. Tonight, we are embarking on a deep and thorough investigation. We will become sonic detectives, tracing the history of this phantom noise from its very first documented appearances. We will visit the communities it has haunted, listening to the stories of those whose lives have been irrevocably altered by its presence. We will meticulously examine the evidence, delve into the strange and fiercely competing theories that attempt to explain its origin, and weigh the strengths and weaknesses of each. We will ask the one question that has echoed in the sleepless minds of thousands upon thousands of sufferers. What is the hum phenomenon? Is it the ghost of our own industrial progress, a resonant whisper from the very crust of the earth, or a phantom symphony being conducted within the impossibly complex architecture of the human brain and auditory system? This is a true worldwide mystery, and its story begins not with a bang, but with the low, incessant, and life-altering hum. Our investigation into this sonic enigma properly begins in the 1970s, although anecdotal reports of similar sounds date back even further. But it was in the city of Bristol, England, where the phenomenon first coalesced into a recognized public crisis. Bristol in the 1970s was a city in transition, a place with a rich maritime history and a legacy of engineering prowess, grappling with the decline of its traditional industries. It was a city of contrasts, of historic Georgian terraces and sprawling post-war housing estates. And in the late 1970s, it unwillingly became famous for something else entirely. A trickle, then a stream, then a flood of complaints began to overwhelm the local council's environmental health department. The letters and phone calls were strikingly eerily similar. They described a low-frequency, pulsating or throbbing noise. A key detail emerged time and time again. It was most audible at night, and almost exclusively indoors. Sufferers reported a litany of debilitating symptoms: chronic insomnia, persistent headaches, dizziness, nausea, and a pervasive sense of anxiety and distress. Some even reported nosebleeds and joint pain, which they attributed to the constant, low-frequency vibration. The local newspaper, the Bristol Post, caught wind of the story, publishing an article that asked, "Have you heard the hum?" The response was overwhelming. The floodgates opened. Hundreds of letters poured in from people who had been suffering in silence, for months, sometimes for years, each one convinced that they were alone in their misery, that they were imagining things, or worse, that they were losing their minds. The letters painted a vivid picture of torment. One retired schoolteacher wrote, "It is a form of torture. There is no escape. It follows you into every room. Silence is a memory I long for." A factory worker compared it to a distant cement mixer that is always on just around the corner, but when you go to look, there is nothing there. Crucially, the vast majority of the population heard nothing at all. This was the defining characteristic that separated it from a typical noise pollution case. This wasn't a loud factory or a busy motorway that affected everyone in its vicinity. This was a selective torment, a sonic sniper picking its victims with no discernible pattern. Husbands couldn't hear what their wives were describing. Children slept soundly while their parents lay awake, tormented. This social dimension added a layer of psychological anguish, as sufferers were often disbelieved, dismissed as complainers, or told it was all in their head. The sheer volume of complaints, numbering nearly 800 at its peak, and the ensuing media pressure, forced the British government to act. A formal scientific investigation was launched, a serious attempt to hunt down the source of the Bristol hum. Acousticians and engineers from the University of Salford descended on Bristol, armed with the most sophisticated sound level meters and spectrum analyzers of the day. They conducted exhaustive tests. They placed microphones in the homes of the complainants, recording for days on end. They scoured the city and its industrial peripheries for potential culprits. The massive industrial fans at the Avonmouth Industrial Estate, the high-pressure gas pumping stations, the electrical transformers in substations. And after all their meticulous work, their official conclusion was a profound and deeply unsatisfying anticlimax. They could not identify a single specific external sound source that could account for the experiences of the hundreds of complainants. They did find a general miasma of low-frequency noise throughout the city, but nothing that was powerful or specific enough to be the definitive culprit. The final report did, however, tentatively point a finger at a combination of two factors. The first was the relentless, low-frequency roar from traffic on the recently constructed M32 motorway, combined with the 24/7 operations of the factories in the industrial zone of Avonmouth, several miles away. The theory was that the combined low-frequency noise from these sources, a sort of industrial soup of sound, could travel for many miles. Under specific atmospheric conditions, like a temperature inversion which can trap and channel sound, this noise could become focused and amplified in the specific topography of the Bristol suburbs where most complaints originated. The second theory was more personal and, for the sufferers, more dismissive: tinnitus. The official report suggested that perhaps these individuals, who were found to be predominantly middle-aged or older, were simply experiencing a specific and unusual form of low-frequency tinnitus. The investigators also made a crucial observation, a finding that would echo through every subsequent hum investigation. The hearing of the sufferers was, ironically, not damaged. In fact, it was often more acute than average, particularly in the low-frequency range. It was as if their ears were perfectly tuned to a station the rest of us couldn't receive. For the sufferers, these explanations felt hollow, like a bureaucratic brush-off. They knew what tinnitus was. Many had experienced the common high-pitched ringing. This, they insisted, was different. This felt external. It had a direction. It seemed to come from outside. And if it was just traffic and industry, the ultimate question remained unanswered. Why couldn't their spouses, their children, their neighbors hear it too? The Bristol hum was never officially solved. For many, it seemed to fade away over the years, perhaps as factories closed or machinery was updated. For others, it remains a persistent, frustrating feature of their lives to this day. Bristol provided the foundational template for the mystery: a widespread public complaint, a remarkably consistent description of the sound, an inability for the majority of the population to perceive it, and a frustratingly inconclusive official investigation. The hum had made its public debut on the world stage, and it was clear this was no ordinary acoustical mystery. From the old world of England, our investigation now crosses the Atlantic, to a place that would become the most famous, most studied, and most iconic hotspot for this phenomenon. A place that would lend its name to the mystery forever. We're going to Taos, New Mexico. Taos is not a place you associate with industrial noise. It's a small town nestled in the high desert, cradled by the majestic Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It's a place renowned for its stark, stunning natural beauty, its tricultural heritage of Native American, Hispanic, and Anglo communities, and its magnetic pull for artists, writers, and spiritual seekers. People move to Taos to find peace, to escape the noise of the modern world, to find quiet and inspiration under the vast, clear sky. It is therefore a deep and bitter irony that in the early 1990s, Taos became the global epicenter of a noise that was the very antithesis of peace. The story unfolds in a pattern hauntingly familiar to what happened in Bristol. but with a uniquely American flavor of citizen science and government intervention. Beginning around 1991, reports began to trickle into local government offices and the town's newspaper. The descriptions were classic hum. A maddening low-pitched sound, sometimes a hum, sometimes a rumble, sometimes a whir. Once again, it was primarily heard indoors and was significantly more prominent at night. And once again, only a small fraction of the population could hear it. Initial surveys conducted by local researchers suggested that around 2% of the Taos population were hearers. These hearers, feeling isolated and dismissed, began to find each other. They formed support groups. They held meetings in the local library. They shared their experiences of sleepless nights, of a constant grinding pressure in their heads, of the sheer psychological exhaustion of living with an incessant, invisible tormentor. The phenomenon became so well known, so much a part of the local identity, that it was officially and globally dubbed the Taos hum. The frustration in the community was palpable. This was not Bristol. This was not an industrial city. The serene desert landscape, miles from any significant industrial activity, offered no obvious culprit. This lack of a clear suspect fueled a proliferation of theories, from the mundane to the truly outlandish. Was it the town's own power grid? Was it secret military experiments? A popular and persistent local conspiracy theory pointed to a secret, underground military base, perhaps connected to the infamous Dulce base legend, supposedly hidden deep within the nearby mountains, using some form of subterranean communication or tunneling technology. The situation escalated to the point where, in 1993, at the direct request of concerned citizens and members of New Mexico's congressional delegation, a formal multidisciplinary investigation was launched. This was no small-town affair. A team of researchers from the University of New Mexico, alongside scientists and engineers from two of the most advanced and secretive scientific institutions in the United States, Los Alamos National Laboratory and Sandia National Laboratories, descended on Taos. This was the scientific cavalry, the minds behind the nation's nuclear arsenal and cutting-edge technology, tasked with solving a mystery sound. Their investigation was, and remains, one of the most thorough and comprehensive attempts to identify the hum ever conducted. They surveyed the hearers and a control group of non-hearers, mapping their locations, cataloging their precise descriptions of the sound, and documenting their physiological and psychological symptoms. They brought in mobile laboratories, deploying sensitive acoustic and vibration sensing equipment across the town. They tested for electromagnetic anomalies, looking for unusual radio waves or magnetic fields. They conducted extensive state-of-the-art hearing tests on a selection of hearers and non-hearers. The results were absolutely fascinating and ultimately, just as maddening as the hum itself. The team was highly effective at ruling things out. It wasn't the town's electrical power grid. It wasn't the local natural gas lines. It wasn't any discernible seismic activity in the traditional sense. And much to the disappointment of conspiracy buffs, their sensitive instruments found no evidence whatsoever of a secret underground military base or any unusual subterranean vibrations that would indicate such activity. The hearing tests, however, revealed something incredibly intriguing, confirming and expanding upon the earlier findings from Bristol. The hearers did not have damaged hearing. They weren't imagining a sound to compensate for hearing loss. In fact, many of them possessed exceptionally sensitive hearing, a condition known as hyperacusis, particularly in the very low frequency (VLF) ranges. It was as if their ears were biological marvels, perfectly tuned to a frequency that most of us are functionally deaf to. But the most compelling and tantalizing piece of evidence came from their acoustic recordings. While they were never able to isolate a single continuous ambient hum that was present everywhere, they did manage to capture something. In the homes of several individual hearers, their equipment recorded a series of distinct pulsing tones. These tones were faint, but they were there, real and measurable, falling between 30 and 80 Hz right in the low-frequency bass range consistently described by the sufferers. They had captured the ghost on tape. But the mystery only deepened. They could not trace these tones to any specific source. The signals were not present outside the homes, and they could not be linked to any appliance or external factor. The sound was there on their tapes, a definitive piece of objective data, yet its origin remained a complete and utter mystery. The final multi-hundred-page report from the Taos Hum investigation concluded, much like its predecessor in Bristol, that they could not identify the source of the hum. They put forth several hypotheses. They conceded it could be a combination of factors, perhaps low-frequency sound generated by distant industrial equipment, carried on the wind, or even a naturally occurring geological phenomenon. But they also had to seriously consider the possibility that the sound was being generated internally by the hearer's own auditory systems, perhaps a rare form of what are known as spontaneous otoacoustic emissions. The investigation into the Taos hum had transformed a local curiosity into a certified scientific paradox. It gave a name and a face to the worldwide mystery, proving beyond a doubt that this was not a simple case of mass hysteria, but a deeply complex phenomenon existing at the bizarre intersection of physics, geography, and human biology. The story, of course, does not end in Taos. As media coverage of the Taos investigation spread, it acted as a catalyst. People in other parts of the world who had been suffering in silence realized they were not alone. A global pattern began to emerge, with reports surfacing from all corners of the planet, each one adding another layer of complexity to this perplexing unexplained sound. Let's travel across the Pacific, to Bondi, a famous sun-drenched suburb of Sydney, Australia. In the early 2000s, residents there began reporting the familiar litany of symptoms. A low, pulsating hum, worse at night, causing sleep deprivation and immense stress. The sound was pervasive enough that it was dubbed the Bondi hum. Local government and independent acousticians launched investigations. Theories were floated, ranging from the ocean waves crashing in a particular way, to the city's sewage ventilation system, to the vibrations from a local gas pipeline. But, as with Bristol and Taos, no definitive source could be found and agreed upon by all. The hum of Bondi became another frustrating, unsolved case file in the global archives of the phenomenon. Then there's Largs, a coastal town in Scotland. For years, residents complained of a similar noise, a low thrumming that plagued their nights. The Scottish government, taking the complaints seriously, commissioned a study. After much investigation, the report pointed a tentative finger at a nearby industrial plant owned by the paper company Invrisk. However, even after the plant implemented noise abatement measures, a significant number of residents insisted the hum remained completely unchanged. Was the plant the true source and some people were just more sensitive? Or was it merely a convenient scapegoat for a more mysterious underlying sound? The ambiguity lingered. Perhaps the most compelling modern case, and one that offers a potential tangible solution for at least some hums, comes from the city of Windsor, Ontario in Canada. Starting around 2011, residents on the Canadian side of the Detroit River began reporting a classic hum. They described it as a low-frequency vibrating noise, sometimes subtle, but at other times powerful enough to physically rattle windows and make people feel dizzy and ill. The Windsor hum quickly became a major local issue, sparking passionate community action groups, extensive media coverage, and high-level political intervention. Canadian researchers, armed with more advanced technology and the knowledge gleaned from previous inconclusive investigations, conducted a multi-year study. Their findings were different. They were able to triangulate a source with a high degree of certainty. The sound, they concluded with confidence, was emanating from across the river from Zug Island, a heavily industrialized and notoriously private piece of land on the U.S. side, in the city of River Rouge, Michigan. The primary suspect was the blast furnace operations at a U.S. steel plant on the island. The immense low-frequency energy generated by these massive industrial processes was traveling across the water and affecting Windsor residents. Here it seemed was the smoking gun. Clear, identifiable, man-made source. Finally, an answer. But the solution wasn't so simple. Zug Island is in a different country. The issue immediately became a bureaucratic and diplomatic headache. Canadian officials couldn't simply go onto the privately owned island to confirm their findings or take definitive measurements at the source. For years, U.S. authorities and U.S. Steel were slow to respond, leading to immense frustration on the Canadian side. Then in 2020, a fascinating development occurred. U.S. Steel idled its operations on Zug Island, and shortly after, many residents of Windsor reported that the hum had either vanished completely or been significantly reduced. The story of the Windsor hum is a landmark case. It provides powerful, almost conclusive evidence for the industrial theory. But even this case leaves nagging questions. If the Windsor hum was from Zug Island, why weren't the residents of River Rouge, Michigan, who live right next to it, the primary complainants? And the familiar pattern persisted. Why did only some people in Windsor hear it with such intensity, while others heard nothing? The familiar selectivity of the mystery endures, even in the face of a seemingly clear answer. The collection of these cases, Bristol, Taos, Windsor, Bondi, Largs, and dozens of other smaller hotspots like Kokomo, Indiana, or Sausalito, California, paints a complex and multifaceted picture. The hum phenomenon is clearly not a single monolithic event. It appears to be a recurring pattern, a sonic ghost that haunts the globe, with different origins in different locations. So, having surveyed the crime scenes and heard the witness testimony, it is time to line up the suspects. We will now explore in detail the three main categories of theories that attempt to explain this enduring acoustic mystery: the industrial, the geological, and the biological. Our first, most tangible, and most rational category of suspects are the byproducts of our own modern world. This is the industrial hypothesis. This theory posits that the hum is nothing more mysterious than low-frequency noise and infrasound pollution generated by the ceaseless activity of human civilization. Our world is an incredibly noisy place, but our ears are primarily attuned to the mid-range frequencies of human speech. The bass and infrasound spectrum below about 200 Hz and especially below 20 Hz is a vast, hidden landscape of sound that we are constantly generating, a sonic underworld that is largely imperceptible to most but not to all. The list of potential culprits is long and varied. It includes the kind of large-scale industrial machinery pinpointed in the Windsor case: blast furnaces, massive stamping presses, and heavy-duty manufacturing equipment. It could be the enormous ventilation fans and air handling units on the roofs of large buildings like hospitals, data centers, or factories. The powerful compressors and pumps used to move gas and liquids through pipelines are notorious generators of low-frequency vibrations. Indeed, the high-pressure gas pipelines that form a subterranean network across our continents are a prime suspect. The turbulence of the gas flowing at high speed, especially as it passes through compressor stations that repressurize the gas for its long journey, produces a powerful low-frequency hum and vibration that can travel for miles through the ground itself. Then there is our electrical grid. The massive transformers and electrical substations and the high-voltage power lines that crisscross our landscape all generate a constant, low-frequency hum at either 50 or 60 Hz, depending on the country's power standard. For most people, this is only audible when you stand directly beneath them, but could certain atmospheric conditions carry this sound further? Even our attempts at green energy have created new sonic suspects. Large-scale wind farms have become a source of intense controversy. Nearby residents in many parts of the world have complained of a persistent, low-frequency thumping or whooshing sound caused by the turbine blades passing the tower. They report a suite of symptoms: sleep disturbance, headaches, anxiety that are remarkably similar to those described by hum sufferers. The industrial hypothesis has a great deal of evidence in its favor. It's grounded in known physics and engineering. It neatly explains why the hum is often localized to specific towns or regions, those that happen to be near a particular source, even one that is miles away. It perfectly explains the diesel engine description. That is, after all, the sound of industry. The Windsor hum case stands as the poster child for this theory, providing a tangible, verifiable source that fits the profile perfectly. But this theory, as robust as it seems, also has significant and perplexing holes. If it's just industrial noise, why is it so notoriously difficult to track and measure? Modern acoustic equipment is incredibly sensitive. If there's a sound source powerful enough to cause physical vibrations in houses miles away, we should be able to find it with relative ease. Yet in the iconic cases of Taos and Bristol, the most exhaustive searches came up empty-handed. Furthermore, it doesn't adequately explain the extreme selectivity of the phenomenon. Why can only 2 to 10% of the population in an affected area hear it? If a powerful low-frequency sound is saturating a neighborhood, more people should be aware of it, even if they don't find it bothersome. And perhaps the most puzzling paradox of all, why do so many hearers report that the sound is significantly louder indoors than outdoors? Most external noise is dampened by walls and insulation. A passing truck is always louder outside than inside. Yet the hum seems to defy this basic principle of acoustics. One possible explanation for this is the masking effect. The varied sounds of the outdoors, wind, birds, traffic, may cover up the hum, while the relative quiet of an indoor space allows it to become prominent. Another, more complex explanation is a phenomenon called a standing wave, or room resonance. When a sound wave has a wavelength that is a perfect multiple of a room's dimension, its length, width, or height, the wave can reflect back on itself, creating points of constructive and destructive interference. This can dramatically amplify the sound in certain hot spots within the room, while canceling it out in others. A low-frequency sound of 40 Hz, for example, has a wavelength of about 28 feet, a dimension quite common in modern homes. This could explain why the hum seems trapped and amplified inside. But for many, these explanations are not enough. The persistence, the pervasiveness, and the sheer elusiveness of the hum in so many cases suggests that we may need to look for a source that is much larger, much more powerful, and much older than our own machinery. This brings us to our second, and far more awe-inspiring category of suspects, the Earth itself. The geological hypothesis. This theory proposes that the hum is not man-made at all, but is a naturally occurring sound, a sonorous whisper from the very planet we inhabit. One of the most compelling and scientifically grounded ideas within this category is the concept of microseisms. The name means tiny earthquakes, but that's a slightly misleading term. Microseisms are not the precursors to a major seismic event. They are a continuous, low-amplitude, ambient vibration of the Earth's crust. And the primary cause of them is utterly fascinating: ocean waves. When long, slow-moving ocean waves traveling in opposite directions interact with each other over deep water, or when they crash relentlessly upon the continental shelves, they generate immense amounts of energy. A portion of this energy is transferred down through the water column to the seabed, creating a constant low-frequency hum that propagates through the solid rock of the planet for thousands upon thousands of miles. The Earth, thanks to its oceans, is constantly ringing like a bell. The fundamental frequency of these microseisms is typically very low, often between 0.1 and 0.5 Hz, which is deep in the infrasound range, far below the threshold of human hearing. However, the complex interaction of these waves can also generate harmonic-higher frequency multiples of this fundamental tone. It is conceivable that these harmonics could creep up into the very lowest end of the human audible range, right in the 20 to 100 Hz band where the hum is most often reported. This theory is elegant and powerful. It explains why the hum is a worldwide mystery. The source, the planet's oceans, is ubiquitous. It could explain why the hum is sometimes reported to be stronger or weaker at different times, as storm activity over the ocean thousands of miles away could intensify the microseismic energy. It also offers a potential explanation for the localization of the hum. Certain unique geological formations, like the specific bedrock or basin structure underneath a town like Taos, might act as a natural resonant amplifier, focusing this planetary vibration in one specific location, much like the body of a violin amplifies the sound of its strings. Another geological possibility is tectonic stress. The rock in the Earth's crust is under constant immense pressure from the movement of tectonic plates. In the time leading up to an earthquake, this stress builds, causing rock to deform, creak, and groan, releasing acoustic energy in the process. Could the hum, in some geologically active areas, be the sound of this tectonic strain? Then there is the Earth's own resonant frequency, known as the Schumann resonances. These are not acoustic, but a set of electromagnetic frequencies in the extremely low frequency, ELF, portion of the Earth's electromagnetic spectrum. They are generated and perpetually excited by the immense energy of lightning discharges, thousands of which occur every minutian, the resonant cavity that exists between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. The fundamental or strongest of these frequencies is a steady 7.83 Hz. While this is an electromagnetic phenomenon, not an acoustic one, some of the more speculative theories propose that under certain conditions, these powerful global resonances could be perceived by particularly sensitive individuals, or could even physically interact with man-made structures or the human brain itself to create the sensation of a hum. The geological hypothesis is alluring because it offers a grand, unifying, and natural explanation. But it, too, faces significant challenges. If the entire planet is humming with microseisms, why is the phenomenon reported so intensely, and in such localized clusters in places like Bristol or Taos? Why wouldn't we find hearers scattered more evenly across the globe, especially along all coastlines? And again, the central persistent question remains, why the extreme selectivity? If the Earth itself is humming, why can't we all hear its primordial song? The mystery endures, and so we must turn our investigation inward, from the vastness of the planet to the intimate confines of the person, to our third and final category of suspects. This is perhaps the most scientifically complex, the most controversial, and for the sufferers of the hum, the most frustrating and invalidating theory of all, the biological or psychological hypothesis. This theory proposes that the hum is not an external sound at all, neither industrial nor geological. Instead, its source lies entirely within the complex, delicate, and sometimes fallible machinery of the human body and mind. The first and most obvious suspect in this category is tinnitus. Tinnitus is defined as the perception of sound when no corresponding external sound is present. It is an incredibly common condition, affecting an estimated 10 to 15% of the population. It's often described as a ringing in the ears, but it can manifest as a vast array of sounds: hissing, buzzing, clicking, roaring, or even a low-frequency humming sound. The causes are numerous, including hearing loss, exposure to loud noise, earwax blockages, and certain medical conditions. So, is it possible that the hum phenomenon is simply a widespread, misidentified, and misunderstood case of low-frequency tinnitus? Hearers of the hum are almost universally adamant that this is not the case. They frequently argue that traditional tinnitus feels internal, like a noise generated inside your head. The hum, they insist, feels distinctly external. It has a spatial quality. It seems to be coming from a particular direction. It's a sound they can sometimes escape by driving away in a car, the noise of the car masking the hum, only to have it return when they get home, something that wouldn't happen with typical tinnitus. However, neurologists would argue that the brain's perception of sound is incredibly complex. The brain can, and does, create auditory phantoms, and it's not impossible for a form of tinnitus to present with these convincing, external-seeming characteristics. A more specific and scientifically compelling, biological explanation involves a fascinating phenomenon known as spontaneous otoacoustic emissions, or SOAEs. Your inner ear is not just a passive microphone. It's an active biological engine. The thousands of tiny outer hair cells in your cochlea can actually move, contract, and generate their own faint sounds as part of the incredible process of amplifying and fine-tuning the sounds we hear. These emissions are real measurable sounds that are literally produced by your own ear. They were discovered in the 1970s by a scientist named David Kemp, and they can be detected with a highly sensitive microphone placed in the ear canal. In most people, these SOAEs are far too quiet to be perceived by anyone, including the person generating them. But the theory suggests that for a small number of people, perhaps due to a unique cochlear structure or a particular state of the auditory system, these self-generated ear sounds could be just strong enough, or the brain's auditory system could amplify them to the point where they cross the threshold of perception and become audible to the person themselves. This could perfectly explain a low-frequency hum that no one else can hear, because it is literally being generated inside your own head. It would also explain why moving to a quieter environment, like a bedroom at night, makes the sound seem louder. There is less external noise to mask your body's own subtle, internal soundtrack. This is a powerful, elegant scientific explanation. It accounts for the selectivity and the baffling internal yet external feeling of the sound. However, it doesn't fully explain the social clustering of the phenomenon. Why would groups of people in the same geographic area like Taos or Bristol suddenly begin reporting the same phenomenon at the same time? It seems statistically improbable for it to be a spontaneous outbreak of a rare medical condition. This leads us to the most delicate and controversial part of this theory: the role of psychology. Could the hum be, in some cases, a product of the immense power of suggestion or a form of collective behavior? The process, known as media contagion or the nocebo effect, the sinister twin of the placebo effect, might work like this. A few people in a community, perhaps genuinely suffering from low-frequency tinnitus, or possessing hypersensitive hearing that allows them to perceive a real but benign background noise, begin to talk about it. The local media reports on a mystery hum. This plants a powerful seed of suggestion in the minds of the wider community. People start actively listening for it. Our brains are incredible pattern-matching machines, evolutionarily wired to detect potential threats in our environment. Once we are told to listen for a low hum, our brain might begin to sift through the normal ambient background noise of our environment, the refrigerator, the heating system, distant traffic, and unconsciously bundle it together, presenting it to our consciousness as the mystery hum we've read about. This does not mean people are lying or crazy. It means their brains are doing exactly what they are designed to do: find patterns and pay attention to what they've been told is important or threatening. The problem with this theory, compelling as it may be from a psychological standpoint, is that it can feel deeply dismissive and insulting to those who suffer. Their experience is viscerally real. The sleep deprivation is real. The headaches are real. The despair is real. Furthermore, this theory struggles to account for the hard, objective evidence, like the distinct acoustic signals recorded in Taos, or the clearly identified industrial source in Windsor. And most importantly, it fails to account for the countless hearers who experienced the sound for months or years before they ever heard of the hum phenomenon, before they knew it had a name, and before they knew that anyone else on Earth shared their bizarre experience. So, after our long and winding journey from the haunted post-industrial suburbs of Bristol to the high desert of Taos, from the noisy shores of the Detroit River to the silent, intricate workings of the human ear, where do we stand? We have surveyed the evidence. We have interrogated the suspects. And yet, no single culprit can be definitively convicted for the crime of the hum. The truth, it seems, is not a single elegant answer, but a messy, complicated, and deeply fascinating mosaic. It is highly probable, indeed almost certain, that there is not one hum, but many hums. The worldwide mystery is likely a convenient umbrella term for a variety of different phenomena that, by coincidence, produce a similar effect on a similar type of sensitive individual. In a place like Windsor, The culprit is almost certainly industrial noise. The hum is the ghost of human machinery. In other places, it might be the result of a unique local geology that acts as a lens, focusing the Earth's natural microseismic vibrations into an audible groan. And for some individuals, scattered across the globe in locations with no discernible pattern, the source may indeed be purely biological, a rare and distressing form of otoacoustic emission or tinnitus that perfectly mimics the sound of an external drone. Perhaps the truest nature of the phenomenon, in its most mysterious forms like Taos, is a perfect storm scenario, an interaction between all three theories. Imagine a person with a naturally sensitive low-frequency auditory system, perhaps with a predisposition for generating audible SOAEs. This person then moves into a house whose dimensions are perfectly sized to create a standing wave at a specific low frequency. And this house happens to be built upon a geological structure that slightly amplifies a faint, low-frequency industrial or geological noise from the environment. For this unlucky individual, all of these independent factors could combine, crossing a critical threshold from the imperceptible to the maddening. They become a perfect biological and architectural receiver for a signal that the rest of us simply cannot, and will never be able to tune into. The enduring power and fascination of the hum phenomenon lies not just in its stubborn resistance to a simple explanation, but in what it reveals about the very nature of perception, reality, and the human condition. The experience of the hearers is a profound and deeply isolating one. It's a stark, daily reminder that we each experience the world through our own unique biological and neurological filter. Your silence is not my silence. My reality is not necessarily yours. The hum forces us to confront the deeply unsettling but wondrous idea that there may be entire layers of reality, sonic, visual or otherwise, that exist just beyond the veil of our common perception, accessible only to a few. The investigation into this unexplained sound is far from over. Dedicated researchers, often on shoestring budgets, continue to study it. Online communities of hearers continue to grow, providing a vital lifeline of support and shared information, allowing them to compare notes and find solace in the simple, powerful knowledge that they are not alone. They are, in effect, citizen scientists on the front lines of a genuine and fascinating modern mystery. And maybe one day a definitive answer will be found. Maybe a new piece of technology, a new understanding of human hearing, or a new way of analyzing our environment will allow us to finally see, or rather hear, what they have been hearing all along. Until then, the hum remains a quiet, persistent testament to the strange and unknown corners of our world, and of ourselves. It is a whisper on the very edge of silence, a puzzle composed of sound and fury, a persistent, throbbing question mark hanging in the quiet air of the night. And so now, I turn the final part of this investigation over to you. Having heard the evidence, what do you believe is the most likely source of the hum? Do you lean towards the industrial, the geological, or the biological explanation? Or do you, like me, suspect the truth is a complex mixture of all three? Have you ever encountered a story like this in your own community? Or perhaps in the dead of night, in the quietest room of your house? Have you ever found yourself listening intently to a strange, persistent sound that no one else seemed to notice? Tell us everything. We would love to read your theories, your personal experiences, and your thoughts in the comments below. Every story, every idea, every piece of anecdotal evidence adds a new and valuable piece to this intricate global puzzle. If you found this deep dive into the acoustic mystery of the hum phenomenon as captivating as we did, please consider showing your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And be sure to hit that notification bell, so you don't miss our next investigation into the histories and mysteries that lie just beneath the surface of the world we think we know. Thank you for listening.